Last week's photo with the Lego Jurassic Park scene was pretty different from what I normally shoot. I've been doing a few more things like that recently, but this right here is a lot more traditional. And I wrote and spoke about this a couple months ago about how after a summer of experimentation, I kind of wanted to return to something familiar. And that's what you see here, only with kind of a twist. So this is a magnolia seed pod, one of my favorite subjects to take photos of. They're at almost any stage of life and death of these magnolia seed pods is so cool to see and to take pictures of. There's just so many textures, there's so many colors. And here you can see one little seed pod just sort of, or seed hanging on before it drops to the ground. And the rest of the seed pod is kind of withered up. And, you could just you could point your camera at this and take a picture and it would be great. You wouldn't even need to do anything really because they're just so interesting. But I wanted to do something maybe a little different, specifically with the foreground. I've taken a lot of shots of these seed pods over the years, and at some point it gets a little repetitive. Like, okay, another magnolia seed pod. That's great. It's good to photograph it. But what else can I do? Rather than do the same type of image, how can I make it a little different? How can I take something I've learned and grow as a photographer as a result? That's what I've done here. So I saw the seed pod, took a few photos of it, and then I thought, I can do better. I wanted a sense of depth in the frame. So the subject is the seed pod right in the center, which is not super creative, but it's fine. I like it. And the background, you've got these magnolia leaves and you've got sun poking through the leaves, which I've done before. But what I haven't really done before is paid special attention to the foreground. What is in front of the seed pod, between the camera and the seed pod, to give this whole scene a sense of depth. So there's three distinct layers. You've got the foreground, this branch. You've got the seed pod, the subject, and then behind it, you've got this background for context and all this visual flair that's really fun to have. I shot this at an aperture that was probably a little too large. It was f6.7. I probably should have gone to f8, maybe even f11. And that's something, depth of field on a macro lens is just so tricky because it's so easy. You have so much control over depth of field that there's a tendency to want to shoot at a wide open aperture because you can, and you can get super close to your subject. But I find, this is a lesson I've learned over and over and over, I find repeatedly, if I just shoot at a slightly smaller aperture than what I think, it's probably going to work just fine, and more of the photo will be in focus, which I kind of biffed that here a little bit. It's fine. In the end of the day, it was great. Everything worked out. I don't want to focus on the tiny little bit that didn't quite work out. f6.7, 1/250th of a second, ISO 360, using auto ISO like I always do because I don't care about the ISO. I need a fast shutter speed. It was windy, so I cared about depth of field. I cared about shutter speed. I did not care about ISO because I almost never care about ISO because it doesn't really matter in 2024. You can shoot at 6400 and make it work. And if you can't, then Lightroom will just clean up the noise for you. So anyway, fun to take this photo. I'm sure it won't be the last magnolia seed pod that I photograph here with the D750.